Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Rati here. So guys, in today's video, I'm going to decode Ruskin Bond's writing for beginners. As those of you familiar with my channel will know, I'm a huge fan of Indian English writers Ruskin Bond's writings, and I've done a lot of Ruskin Bond book recommendations video. So in this video as well, I'm going to recommend you some books of Ruskin Bond, but we'll do it slightly differently. What I really want to do is to decode Ruskin Bond for a beginner, Ruskin Bond's writings for a beginner rather. So if you're new to reading Ruskin Bond's books, if you have never read the author and you don't know how to go about it, this video will help you in making that journey. And even if you're a beginner reader, as in, sort of new to reading any genre of book, new to any kind of reading for that matter, I'm going to tell you which Ruskin Bond books you should start with. So to begin with, a general introduction about Ruskin Bond's books. So one thing, you must know about his books is that most his books are kind of interconnected. So these settings, the locations, and the characters that you meet in one of his novels, you will probably meet them again, in some of his other works, and it's a recurring continuum, as he has spoken himself in many interviews, that there are a lot of autobiographical elements in his works, be it his novels, short stories, or works specifically targeted for children's fiction. There are a lot of autobiographical elements, and most of the stories are based in familiar settings, be it in Dehra, which is Dehradun, or Mussoorie, Landor in Mussoorie, where Ruskin Bond currently resides and has been residing for a long time. So there's a kind of continuum in his works, which is which really helps to understand his journey as a writer, and which really helps you to connect with all his work. So it's not like reading sort of like works which are disjoint from one another. It's like coming to terms with having a rendezvous with with a beautiful journey of a writer who is celebrated not just in India but all across the world. So that's something that as a beginner reader you must know. As somebody who has never read Ruskin Bond, you must keep this in mind, that his works have a lot of autobiographical elements, although they're works of fiction, and it's not as if he's directly telling you sort of as it is what's happening in his life, but the characters which he picks up, and it's everything is basically inspired from his real life. So when you pick up one Ruskin Bond book, you can be sure that you would come across the settings and some of those characters in other books. So now let's get started with the book recommendations. So I think this is, his first book, The Room on the Roof by Ruskin Bond. The Room on the Roof, in fact, he penned down this novel when he was just 17 years old. And this I would definitely recommend for beginners. If you're new to Ruskin Bond, I think you should definitely start with The Room on the Roof. You can start with The Room on the Roof. It's kind of like Ruskin Bond's Bildungsroman, of course, in a fiction mode, but inspired by his real life. I've also done a separate review of The Room on the Roof on my YouTube channel. You can check that out as well. So this is a very accessible book for a beginner. I think it's equally suitable for children and adults, though, Ruskin Bond's books, especially The Room on the Roof, is generally marketed as a children's book, but I read it as an adult a couple of years back, and I had absolutely fun reading it. So, it's suitable for all age groups, and that's the beauty of Ruskin Bond's works, is that, whatever age group you are, whatever your level of reading, your level of comprehension, it is accessible to everybody. And, depending on your own context and, your own interpretive frames, you can actually get different things from Ruskin Bond's book. So for a reader who is reading these works literally, The Room on the Roof can be like really enjoyable, a child's journey, an Anglo-Indian child's journey in post-independent India. And it's a lot of fun to read, very vibrant, and it's teeming with Indianness, the pages of this book. But for a more complex and nuanced reading, the book also lends itself to a more complex and nuanced reading, as I've discussed in my review as well. And there's a lot of stuff about different the kind of conditions in post-independent India and the white man's burden which still existed. So this kind of clash of identity, this clash of culture between the so-called natives and the whiteness, which is all of a sudden thrust on Indian culture and civilization. You can find, some critical reflections on that as well in The Room on the Roof if you're a nuanced reader. Of course, it's all from a child's perspective. So I would certainly recommend The Room on the Roof by Ruskin Bond to beginner readers. The second book that I'd like you to start with is Falling in Love by Ruskin Bond. Falling in Love by Ruskin Bond is a collection of love stories, as the name suggests, and this is a very handy book if you're new to Ruskin Bond, because it has a lot of stories. There are a lot of stories in this collection which are a part of, which have been either, sort of written as complete novels by Ruskin Bond, or which are a part of his, sort of other collections as popular stories. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a kind of a refresher course which will actually, sort of give you an overview of a lot of Ruskin Bond's popular writings without you having to buy those novels separately. So I can give you some of those examples. Some of the stories, like, for example, Binya Passes By. It's a very popular story of Ruskin Bond, and the character of Binya, I think, reappears in many of his stories. So you'll find the story in this particular book. Then, Susanna's Seven Husbands. Now, Susanna's Seven Husbands is a whole separate novel also based on Susanna's Seven Husbands, but you can read it in an abridged form, in the form of a short story in this collection. So I think, it's fairly representative of different kinds of short stories, different kinds of work that Ruskin Bond has been writing over decades. So this is a really handy book, and it was written fairly recently, a couple of years back. So I think it will give you a good overview into Ruskin Bond's writing style. The third book that I'm going to recommend you is How to Be Happy. Now, How to Be Happy, guys, is a fairly recent work of Ruskin Bond, and this book especially is very, very accessible to beginner readers. If your English vocabulary is, fairly limited and you struggle to read anything complex, I would specially recommend you this book, because it's mostly it's written, in a sort of in the style of a children's work, something which can be accessible to children as well. So the font is, very, very reader friendly. There are these huge fonts which are very artsy, and there's a lot of illustrations, a lot of colorful illustrations in this book. So the book itself is very vibrant and colorful. And I'm going to show you, some screenshots of the book. So it's very, very accessible to a beginner reader. The way in which the book has been structured. And the amazing thing is that, this book doesn't really have stories as such, but it's more of sort of reflections from Ruskin Bond's personal life, his personal memoirs, and, reflections on those little things which make us happy, be it sipping a warm cup of coffee by a window on a sunny afternoon, or, having your favorite bread omelette for breakfast. So it's basically these little things that make you happy, then appreciation for nature, appreciation for the slowness of life. So it's, these eternal things which we should be grateful for, and which we kind of forget, as we go on with life, and we sort of, get sucked into the vortex of life. We forget these little joys which really give us happiness and which bring real meaning to our life. So the roads to How to Be Happy by Ruskin Bond is about all those things. And like I said, it's very, very accessible to a beginner reader. And it would give you a glimpse into, sort of the life of Ruskin Bond, the person. So I would certainly recommend this book. The final book that I'd recommend to beginner readers is How to Be a Writer by Ruskin Bond. Now, this is an absolute pleasure to read, and I've read this book so many times, and each time I read this book again, there's something new I learned from this book. Again, I've done a separate review of this book on my channel. I'm going to link back that review as well. Now, How to Be a Writer is especially handy because, obviously, for all aspiring writers, I would say, but also for beginner readers, it's an extremely handy book, because the way the book has been written actually kind of, sort of attracts you to the process of writing. And it obviously gives you many valuable tips on, on sort of how to go about writing fiction. So for those of us who aspire to writing fiction but don't quite know how to go about it, and, especially when we're struggling with writing our first fiction book, this book really comes in handy. And the best part is that the author gives a lot of examples, and also he talks about his own writing style. And one of the most important points that, stayed throughout with me when I was reading this book is how he talks about the importance of, sort of, especially when you're writing your first book, taking material from your own life, from, from the setting of your own life, from settings and places familiar to you, and to write, a story based on something authentic, then create, a complete sort of make-believe fantastic setting. Because, when you're trying to create a story out of something more authentic, something which you've personally experienced, obviously, readers are going to relate to it more. It comes across, as sort of more interesting, as more authentic, vibrant, and then of course, as it's going to be less challenging for you to, sort of write that kind of story. Of course, you can embellish it with all, fiction. You don't have to reveal facts about your own life. But what he's trying to say is that, he's talking about his own writing process, essentially. Like I said, when he writes all his works, the places repeat, the familiar locations and the context, any kind of, he will play around a bit with characters, sort of reinvent the characters here and there and change their personality a little bit, and, sort of rename them from one work to the next. But the essential template remains the same. So, I think it's very interesting, the kind of advice he's offering to a new writer. So this is it's an absolute pleasure. If you are new to Ruskin Bond, how to be a writer is also definitely a good place to start. So guys, that's it for today. I just wanted to just decode, Ruskin Bond's writings for beginners. And, he's literally a legend in the world of Indian English writing. Like I said that, Ruskin Bond's writings have that unique charm, which I think, somehow in this kind of like technology, whether you call it technology laden existence or wired existence, AI sort of infested existence, those little joys that we are forgetting. And he makes a lot of nuanced points about the nature, environment, human consciousness, and basically about the pull of, human emotions, which is something which binds us together, and, the supreme bliss of human emotions, connecting and bonding with other human beings, and the organic bond between human beings and nature. This is, these are some sort of prime themes which come across in Ruskin Bond's writings, which are, so omnipresent, which are so universal, and yet, these are the themes which, never go out of fashion. So guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the channel, if you like the content, please do press the like button, and please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.